Hey everyone, it's Justine Browning here at Clearview Cinemas in Chelsea for the premiere of the World War I romantic drama Testament of Youth, starring Kit Harington and Alicia Vikander. Was it intimidated by a woman like Vera Brittain who was so ahead of her time? Why do you think he was so forward-thinking?
I think his mother was a huge influence upon him in that way. You know, his mother was a very progressive woman for her time. She was the breadwinner in the family. She was a writer herself. But he's also not. He's quite a kind of, you know, at one point in the film he comes up and he sort of says, "Oh, I know how to get you into Oxford, let me help you," and it's sort of a kind of patronising pat on the head, and she rightly shuts the door in his face. So I think he's not quite there as far as how we'd want him to be, but yeah, he learns it as the film goes on. Right,
she definitely changes him for the better, I think. Would you say that's the case? How did that affect your choice as well, your acting choice?
I think it was just a really sad story to tell, that they knew each other for 17 days, they never consummated their marriage. It's like, I don't know, it's a very unique story in that way. It's a love story where everything's about the tiniest touch, or the stolen kiss in the corner. You know, it's an old school love story, which, you know, is very true to the period.
They were having chaperoned dates, which is so unimaginable. Like, it definitely shows the repression of sexuality and the danger in that.
Yeah, a different time. I mean, this film does, I think, feel very modern at points. It feels very relevant, definitely, but there's also wonderful little references back to things that aren't quite so similar now.
Well, at one point, you actually read Vera's poetry, or the poetry that you actually wrote for Vera, that Roland actually wrote for Vera. Yeah. And that's a really great primary source to have, you know, that poetry.
Yeah, the poetry that he wrote, the letters that he wrote to Vera, the letters that Vera wrote to him. I had all of that, so I had his voice in my, you know, in my head the whole time, and I had that great research tool. It was wonderful to play someone who existed, who lived.
Oh, sure, and in a 600-page memoir about, you know, that whole relationship.
Yeah, you know, I read that twice, and then I read it a third time. I read it for the third time for the film, but I didn't call upon that too much. It was more Vera's voice that. The letters from the Lost Generation, the letters that he wrote to her, was more useful to me.
What aspects of that book were the most important in crafting this story for you?
I mean, I did read the book, and that is what this film is about. But I think when it came to the personal kind of preparation work that I did, except for, of course, like I said, reading the book, the most thing that was probably the most important for me was it was two books that she made that were kind of gathering all the letters and through all the correspondence between, well, the young men in this film and her family, and then also her diary notes. Because in one way, the book that we know here is, you know, she wrote that about 10 years after this actual event, so it's her kind of looking back on the experiences that she went through. Whilst in one way the letters and the diaries were a direct access to that girl of that time. So for me, and I think both Kit and I actually, we carried a lot of the letters with us on set and kind of read them, and a lot of the poems that they sent to each other. And it's really heartbreaking, you know, and it was also quite beautiful to realize how much those young people kind of shared their love and ideas through, well, written poems.
Was that helpful to you in sort of creating this love story where you are barely in scenes together and barely touching, because you had, you know, chaperone
time, which is, you know, because when you read the book, those, you know, young, you know, people feel so ahead of their time in one way, and still they're kind of stuck in the conventions and not even being able to, like, sit in a room without having a chaperone. And also, I think, you know, they actually only saw each other 21 days, I think, in total. But the kind of emotional relationship that they managed to build throughout all those letters and exchange of poems is quite remarkable.
What's so fascinating is she was one of the first women to actually want to go to school, to get into Oxford.
Well, it was probably, you know, a lot of women who wanted to, but it was just, that was just not what a woman of her time was supposed to do. And yeah, I'm just extraordinary, you know, amazed by the determination that she must have had. She locked herself up in a room just to kind of keep, you know, use hours and hours to try and, you know, teach herself and prepare herself for the Oxford test.